Chapter 11. Investigation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Noodletown translated editor. Noodletown translated. Huamian didn't remember how she got home. She sat alone in the darkness for a long time, and the event that had just taken place was so unreal that it felt like a dream to her. The lingering pain on her cheek was the mark that Ning Ziyuan's hand had just left behind. They had known each other since college, and Ning Ziyuan courted her for a very long time. It was only after careful consideration that she began dating him. He wasn't extremely outstanding, but he really had been good to Huamian. She thought that she would live the rest of her life like this, ordinarily. She never expected something like this to happen at such a critical time. Qin Chu's return seemed to have shaken everything into disarray. After a while, she regained enough of her senses to check her cell phone. She had more than a dozen missed calls, all from Zhu Lingling. There were also 3 unread messages on WeChat. Mian, why aren't you answering your phone? Did something happen? Mian, Qin Chu left soon after you did. What's going on with you two? Is he trying to patch things up with you? Mian, say something. Are you okay? Huamian may have had 1,000 words that she wanted to say, but as crestfallen as she currently was, she didn't have any desire to speak. After some thought, she replied to the message. I'm a little tired today. I'll fill you in when I see you again. I'm okay, don't worry about me. Zhu Lingling replied a few seconds later. Okay, as long as I know you're alright. Mian, I hope you understand that there are some things you have to face eventually. No one knew more about what happened between Huamian and Qin Chu than Zhu Lingling. As Huamian's bestie throughout high school, Zhu Lingling had borne witness to the passionate love between her and Qin Chu. Unfortunately, the two parted ways after that incident. Huamian picked up her phone again and dialed Ning Ziyuan's number, but his phone was off. She knew that, to Ning Ziyuan, this incident was too sudden and too cruel. It was her past, but now he was stuck paying the price. Who was to blame? In the dark, Huamian softly sighed. She knew that some things couldn't be kept away forever. These were things that couldn't be evaded. City outskirts, in the upper-class district. A silver Audi R8 steered slowly onto the grounds of a majestic manor, and the dozen or so guards bowed towards his car in respect. With a quiet squeal, the car slid to a stop before the front door of the manor and Qin Chu stepped out from the vehicle without an expression on his face. He opened the door and walked in. Mrs. Qin immediately rose to her feet, smiling and saying, Chu, you're back. Your dad and I have been waiting for you to start dinner. Hurry, go wash your hands. Qin Chu didn't respond. Instead, he walked straight into the dining room and sat down beside his father, Qin Yuman. He stared at his father with mixed emotions. Dad, I have something to ask you. What is it? Catching his son's less than amicable gaze, Qin Yuman felt a strange sense of unease. Back then, in order to force Huamian and I apart, what did you two do to her family? After Qin Chu finished with his question, both Qin Yuman's and Mrs. Qin's expressions had undergone a drastic change. Chu, what are you talking about? Mrs. Qin smiled stiffly. L.C. Qin Chu didn't respond and continued to focus his unwavering gaze on his father, trying to find some answer on his face. Qin Chu went abroad 7 years ago and hadn't been back ever since. He didn't know what happened during that time. However, earlier, he sensed a deep hatred in Huamian's tone. He was smart enough to guess that his parents probably did something unscrupulous to Huamian's family. Qin Yuman felt very uncomfortable under his own son's gaze. A minute later, Qin Yuman lowered his eyes. His reply seemed like an attempt to dodge the subject. It was such a long time ago, why would you bring it up again? Chapter 12. The Truth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Noodletown translated editor. Noodletown translated, all I need is a yes or no, I want an answer. As he spoke, Chin Chu's expression became frighteningly cold. Chu, we did it for your own good. It's all in the past anyway. Just. Chin Chu shot up to his feet before Mrs. Chin even had the chance to finish. I knew it. He had already gotten the answer he needed from his mother's tone. Having expected this all along, Chin Chu got up. Without another word, he walked upstairs to his room on the second floor. Chu, eat before you head upstairs to rest, Mrs. Chin called out to her son's retreating figure, concerned for his well-being. However, instead of a reply, all she got was a chilling view of her son's back. Human. Chu, could he still be hung up on that damn girl? It's been so long, and now he's finally home. Oh, I hope nothing else goes wrong. What do you think? Mrs. Chin was left somewhat shaken by her son's attitude. It had been 7 years, and her son was finally back in the country. She really didn't want things to get as bad between them as it had been before, all because of a woman. Never mind it. He's a grown man now and can make decisions by himself. With that, Chin Yuman picked up his chopsticks and began to eat angrily. Chin Chu went back to his room. Picking up his cell phone, he dialed a number. Check something out for me as soon as possible, he said, and then promptly hung up. Then, he slowly unlocked one of the drawers and took out a yellowing photograph. There was a girl in the picture with a ponytail. She was pretty and had distinct facial features. The pair of dimples that appeared when she smiled were adorable. The fact that she was wearing a baggy school uniform didn't make her any less beautiful. Mian, I've missed you so much. He spoke in a low, hoarse voice like a man who was hopelessly in love. His memories traced back to the scene in the photograph, taken 7 years ago. Blue skies, white clouds, school grounds, and the girl he loved. The next morning, Hua Mian got up early and boarded the bus to the hospital where she worked. After she finished attending to her own duties, she grabbed the pork bone soup she had made that morning and went to find Ning Ziyuan. She wanted to explain to him what had happened yesterday. At the outpatient ophthalmology department. When Hua Mian went in, she found He Man, one of the nurses, carefully bandaging the wound on Ning Ziyuan's forehead. Geez, how did this happen, Dr. Ning? How can you be so careless? The female nurse's voice was artificially high-pitched, in a way that made people uncomfortable. Ziyuan, Hua Mian called out softly by the door. Both of them turned around to face her. Ning Ziyuan's expression was blank as his gaze fell upon Hua Mian. There was no telling what he was thinking of. Ah, Hua Mian, you're here. You two go on and chat, I'll leave. Don't go. Ning Ziyuan suddenly reached out and grabbed He Man, finish patching up my wound. Dr. Ning, you should really let your girlfriend tend to you, He Man said as she chuckled awkwardly. Hua Mian wanted to say something, but before she could, she heard Ning Ziyuan spat out word by word, she is not my girlfriend anymore. What did you say? Hua Mian slightly frowned. I said, we broke up yesterday. You're not my girlfriend anymore, and I'm not worthy of an upper-class girlfriend like you. So why don't you go find your super-rich ex-boyfriend? He has luxury cars and a mansion, and I'm just a poor doctor. You would be doing yourself a disservice if you continued to stay with me. Ning Ziyuan's tone was petulant. Hua Mian took a deep breath. Ziyuan, she said, her expression calm, I came here today to explain what happened last night. Chapter 13. Explanation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Noodletown translated editor. Noodletown translated, explain. What do you have left to explain? Ning Ziyuan asked Hua Mian with an unsettlingly cold and distant attitude. It was as if he wasn't the sweet and caring man that she had dated for 3 years. So much had changed within the span of a single night. Ziyuan, we've been together for 3 years. Don't you know me? Ning Ziyuan looked up at Huamian's face and smiled, I really don't, darling. If it weren't for last night, I really would have thought that you were a pure goddess who I could love and care for. Who would have known that the goddess I thought you were was just a facade? You already slept with someone 7 years ago. How old were you back then? 18. Huamian, I finally see how shameless you are. No wonder you chose to date me. It seems like I was getting someone else's leftovers. Ning Ziyuan purposely emphasized the word leftovers. Even Nurse He-Man, a bystander, turned to look at Huamian with shock and disbelief. Although Huamian was faced with Ning Ziyuan's cruel words, she felt more disappointed than hurt. She could not believe that such insidious words would come from the mouth of a man who looked so gentle and kind. Huamian gave Ning Ziyuan a disappointed look before slowly saying, Ziyuan, everyone has a past. What happened between me and Qin Chu is already history. Shut up and stop showing off your ex-boyfriend. I find him disgusting. Who does he think he is? Does driving an Audi R8 make him cool? If you like him so much, why don't you go make up with him and leave me alone? Ziyuan, you may not be calm right now and I know that you are angry. When people are angry, they make irrational decisions and end up regretting it. I'll give you time to calm down and we can talk later. After speaking, Huamian turned around and left. Ning Ziyuan was a little distressed. He courted Huamian for a whole 3 years, surprising everyone at their medical school. He had indeed fallen in love with her, but he could never accept his fiancée's disgraceful past. Not to mention that her ex-boyfriend dared to brag about it and even kissed her yesterday. He and Huamian had been together for so long, yet they've never slept together. All this new information about her past was not easy to process. Dr. Ning, I can't believe that Huamian is so frivolous. What a shame, He-Man muttered under her breath. Why is that a shame? Ning Ziyuan frowned lightly. A shame that a man like you went to waste, of course. So many nurses in our department think you're a great catch, He-Man said with a smile on her face. Ning Ziyuan pursed his lips. Truth be told, Ning Ziyuan was quite attractive and looked somewhat like the main character from a Korean drama. In big hospitals like this, most attending physicians were middle-aged men in their 40s. Younger doctors were rare and, therefore, were much more popular. Many nurses had confessed their feelings to him in the past, but he already had Huamian. They were going to buy an apartment together and get married, so he never thought much about anything else. Now that something of this caliber had happened between them, perhaps it was time for him to start reconsidering things. Really? Am I that popular? Smiling, Ning Ziyuan asked. Of course. As those words escaped He-Man's mouth, Ning Ziyuan lowered his head and approached her lips, asking, does that include you? He-Man smiled, her eyes narrowing into slits as she teased back, what do you think? Ning Ziyuan and the nurse continued to flirt in the ophthalmology clinic. Meanwhile, in the OB/GYN department, Huamian was in no state to work. Her heart was elsewhere and her mind wandered. Huamian, do you know how many times I've called you? The head nurse angrily yelled. Chapter 14. Passivity. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Noodletown translated editor. Noodletown translated, yes, head nurse. I told you to get me some surgical masks. Have you gone deaf? Yes, I'll go get them now. Mian, what's wrong? Is there something on your mind? Do you need to take the day off? I feel like you've been distracted all day, the new nurse, Huang Yu, asked with a hint of concern. Exhausted, Huamian shook her head. She had been listless this entire day. What was worse was that it wasn't even because of the Cold War situation with Ning Ziyuan. She had been thinking about the man that she shouldn't be thinking about. Was he really back? What happened last night wasn't a dream, was it? Her days lasted until her shift ended. Huamian changed from her white nurse's uniform into a pastel-blue dress. Grabbing her bag, she walked out. She was just in time to catch sight of Ning Ziyuan's white Chevrolet, which was parked outside of the front entrance. He had just bought it last month. Since they were planning on getting married, Ning Ziyuan's parents had helped pay for the car. This, along with their own salaries, summed up to over 100,000 yuan. It was a pretty good-looking ride. The license plate read 0510, which was Ning Ziyuan's birthday. It was him for sure. Did he stop here to wait for her? Just as Huamian was about to walk over and ask, she saw He-Man, who was wearing a miniskirt. She sprinted over to the car and, after quickly opening the door, hopped onto the passenger seat. Then, the car sped off. Light drained from Huamian's eyes, bit by bit. She unhurriedly pulled out her cell phone and made a call. What is it? On the other end, Ning Ziyuan sounded annoyed. Is your shift over? I need a ride home. Not yet. I have another surgery. I'll be working overtime so you can go home first. Don't call me for no reason. Bye. With that, Ning Ziyuan hung up the phone. Huamian smiled wryly, she knew why Ning Ziyuan was lying. He was trying to get revenge on her. However, what he did was just low. Huamian suddenly got the feeling that the ordinary man she had dated for 3 years was no longer ordinary. She looked up at the sky. It was gray, just like her mood. Then, Zhu Lingling called. Mian, are you off work now? Yeah. Come to my place, I'm off today and made something yummy for you. It's marinated pork trotters. That's good, I happen to be hungry too. Wait for me. Hanging up, Huamian flagged down a cab and headed towards Zhu Lingling's home. Zhu Lingling's parents lived by the city outskirts. To make her commute to work easier, she had rented a cozy little place near the airport. Whenever she had the time, Huamian would go over to mooch off her food. It seemed that, aside from home and the hospital, that was the only place she could go. Setting the pork trotters on the table, Zhu Lingling began rambling off before Huamian even had the chance to eat. She was asking about what happened yesterday. Unable to bear the bombardment, Huamian recounted the events for her in a relatively detailed fashion. Of course, she kept some of the more provocative details, such as the forced kiss, to herself, only brushing over them. That's what happened. You're welcome to comment, Miss Zhu Lingling. Huamian stared at Zhu Lingling with pursed lips and big wet doe-eyes. It was a cute look. Gosh, that's intense. So, what you're saying is Mr. Blueblood Qin Chu proposed to you yesterday. Zhu Lingling stared back at her with a look of surprise. Girl, please. That's not the issue here. The issue is that Ziyuan doesn't trust me anymore and wants to break up. Huamian complained. Mian, tell me the truth. Do you still love Qin Chu? Zhu Lingling asked, dead serious. Huamian froze upon hearing this question. Chapter 15. Provocation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Noodletown translated editor. Noodletown translated. Then, she turned to look out the window with a complicated expression on her face. It was a while before she finally responded, what does it matter if I love him or not? Things happened. There's no taking them back, and there's no changing how things turned out. Zhu Lingling heard a heavy melancholy in Huamian's voice. She felt a genuine pang of heartache for her friend. Mian, when we were in high school, the fact that you and Qin Chu got together was what made me believe that fairy tales can be real. You were both such outstanding people. How did it ever get to where it is today? It's such a pity. I'm going to say something, but you can't get mad. I've always felt like Ning Ziyuan wasn't good enough for you. I mean, back in school, you were. Huamian cut Zhu Lingling short before she could finish. Lingling, stop. It's all in the past. No matter how I feel about Qin Chu, there's no way we can ever be together again. You know what happened, that incident 7 years ago, and what it did to me. I've already lost my family. What could be worse than that? I really wish that I was the one who died back then. At this point, Huamian's voice caught in her throat. Zhu Lingling was aware of what happened. It was that incident which made Huamian hide away her radiant aura, resigning to become a hobbling member of the common masses. Zhu Lingling placed a hand on Huamian's shoulder and comforted, "Mian, listen to me. It's been so long, so stop blaming yourself. Haven't you been trying to make up for it all these years? I don't think you can place all the blame on Qin Chu either. You know very well that he had been out of the country for years. Considering how he felt about you, I don't think there's any way he could have known about what happened. So what? He's still a member of the Qin family, isn't he? Can he really shake off all the blame for what his family did?" Huamian's eyes were red as she demanded. "Mian." Zhu Lingling seemed to want to say more. However, she was cut short when she saw Huamian raise a hand. "Lingling, you don't have to say anything else. You're my best friend, and I know that you're just telling me what you think is best for me, but you can't possibly understand the things I've experienced. Let me make up my own mind about this, okay? Alright, I just hope that, whatever you decide, you don't wrong yourself. I've seen how hard the past few years have been for you. I really wish that you could return to being the high and mighty Huamian from before, the one who wouldn't let anyone else influence her." Huamian smiled bitterly but didn't reply. All she wanted was to have a good time eating pork trotters. However, with the heavy subject of Qin Chu hanging in the air, she no longer had an appetite. She barely touched the food before quickly leaving her friend's place. On her way back, she wondered if she should call Ning Ziyuan again. After all, she was in the wrong first. Just as she pulled out her phone and was about to dial, it rang. The caller ID displayed her little brother's number. She picked up immediately, "Jixin. Sis, hurry. You need to come to the hospital. Mom collapsed." On the other end, Jing Jixin's voice was wrought with anxiety. "What? Mom collapsed? How? Which hospital? I'll head over right now. We're at the 4th People's Hospital, the one near home. Come to the 7th floor, room 709. Okay, I'll be right there." Hanging up, Huamian's expression was distressed. "Sir, please turn around and go to the 4th People's Hospital." 20 minutes later. Huamian rushed up the stairs and barged through the doors of a hospital room. Her mother was lying on a bed, still unconscious. Her face was pale, and she was wearing an oxygen mask. Beside her was a boy in his late teens wearing a black Nike tracksuit. His hair was a bit long and his facial features were rather delicate. He was Huamian's half-brother, Jing Jixin, and they were related on their mother's side. "Sis, you're here. Jixin, what happened to Mom? Weren't you at school? Why are you at the hospital?" Chapter 16. Difficult subject. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Noodletown Translated Editor. Noodletown Translated. I was in gym class when I got a call from our neighbor, Mrs. Wu. She said that our mom fainted in front of her convenience store. I told the teacher that I had to leave, called for an ambulance, and came right away. Mom's always been fairly healthy. How did this happen? Huamian was sick with worry. Just then, the door opened and a doctor walked in. "Which of you is Yang Meirong's family member? Come outside for a minute." "I am." Huamian hurriedly followed the doctor outside. "You're the patient's daughter, right?" The doctor made a guess based on Huamian's age. Huamian nodded. Were you aware that the patient suffers from high blood pressure? Questioned the doctor harshly. BDNV, I know, but my mother has been taking her medications, and she had been making sure that she gets enough rest. I check her blood pressure whenever I have the time, and it's been fairly stable for a while now. Our guess is that the patient suffered from some kind of shock, resulting in heightened blood pressure. As her children, you really need to be more careful. The patient has heart problems on top of high blood pressure. If this keeps happening, it'll cost the patient her life. Do you understand? Suffered a shock. Huamian was surprised. She was busy with her job, and only went home once every 2 weeks. Her little brother was a good kid, so what else could have been the trigger? When the patient wakes up, you can ask her yourself. We recommend that she stay at the hospital for a week to regulate her blood pressure. What do you think? Not a problem. A nurse herself, Huamian didn't dare to take chances. She knew how serious the condition was. Okay, you can go pay the hospitalization fees now. Okay. Huamian nodded. Then, she hurried downstairs and headed towards the cashier's stall on the first floor. The total comes to 7,908 yuan. That much. Huamian's expression was troubled. Over these past few years, half of the money she had earned was spent on her brother, and the other half had gone towards the down payment for the house she had bought with Ningzi Yuan. She only had 3,000 yuan left in her bank account. Now, they were asking for more than 7,000, all at once. She really didn't have that much money. Are you paying or not? Hurry up, there are people behind you. Don't hold up the line. I'll pay. Huamian hurriedly took out her credit card. She had gotten the card last year, and she remembered that its spending limit was 10,000 yuan. Having paid the fees, she went back to the hospital room. By then, her mother had woken up. Mom, you're awake, Huamian said carefully. What did you come here for? Get lost. Yang Meirong seemed extremely upset to see Huamian. Mom, I was the one who called sis. Jing Jixin rushed up and tried to calm her down. You don't need to come and see me. I'm not sick, I don't need to stay at a hospital. Jixin, go fill out the discharge forms. We're going home. Yang Meirong was insistent on getting out of bed. Mom, your condition is rather serious. They need to get your blood pressure down first. You have to stay here for a week before you can be discharged. It's none of your business. Whose fault is it that I ended up this way? Yang Meirong roared. Our family would have never ended up like this if it weren't for you, you accursed thing. Mom, don't say that. It's not Sis's fault. Shut up. Yang Meirong was clearly very worked up. This accursed thing killed your dad with her bad luck, and now that damned man is back too. He came to our home and strutted about, thinking he's almighty just because he has money. Compensation. That's a neat way of putting it. Who wants his stinking money? Can his money bring the dead back to life? At that, Huamian felt her heart sink as she finally seemed to understand what happened. Mom, did Qin Chu come looking for you? Chapter 17. Rage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Noodletown Translated Editor. Noodletown Translated, you have the audacity to ask me that. Don't tell me that you have already met with him on your own. Yang Meirong glared viciously at Huamian. Huamian was at a loss for words. It was true that she had met with Qin Chu, even though it was unintentional. But, her mother would never listen to her explain. Anything she could say right now would only make her mother angrier. L.RG, Mom, get some rest. I'll come and see you tomorrow. I don't need your pity. If you have a sliver of shame left, don't ever come see me again. You would only make me die sooner, just like what you did to your Uncle Jing. Her mother's mocking words sent a stabbing pain straight to Huamian's heart. She had been blaming herself for Uncle Jing's death for 7 years. Over these 7 years, no one had been more bereft than her. At this thought, she fell silent. Turning around, she pushed open the door and left. "Sis, I'll walk you out." Jing Zixin followed her out, knowing that his sister must be feeling down. "Sis, Mom just has a bad temper. Don't think about what she said. She's been like this for a few years now. Besides, from what I read, women her age can get menopausal. That's what's happening to Mom for sure." "Oh, Squirt, what kinds of books have you been reading?" Huamian looked at her brother, both mad and amused. "Sis, don't worry about what's happening here. I'll take care of Mom. Go do whatever you have to do." Huamian nodded. "I'll call off work tomorrow and come to take care of her. You should go back to school tomorrow. Oh, and here's the money to cover your living expenses for next month. Take it." Huamian pulled out 1,000 yuan in cash from her purse and handed it to her brother. "Sis, I don't need it. I still have money left from last month. Besides, I'm working part-time at school, so you don't have to give me money anymore. You're getting married, and there's going to be plenty of things that you and Ziyuan will need money for. Take it. Even if I'm getting married, I can still spare a little bit to give to you. Zixin, I know you're concerned for me, so you've been careful of where you spend your money. But, you can't pinch money where it's meant to be spent. You're still a growing boy and need to eat properly." With that, Huamian rubbed the top of her brother's head affectionately. "I know, sis. You too." Huamian left the hospital with a heavy heart. She hadn't expected Qin Chu to find her mother and brother so quickly. What was he trying to do? Perhaps, they really needed to talk. Taking out her cell phone, she pulled out her call history. That unfamiliar number ending with 8866 was definitely his. After a moment's hesitation, she made the call. As soon as the call went through, Huamian began questioning angrily, "Hey, Qin Chu. What in the world do you want from me?" "I'm sorry, President Qin is in a meeting. May I ask who is calling?" An unfamiliar man's voice came from over the line. Caught by surprise, Huamian didn't speak. "I'm President Qin's assistant, Yang. May I take a message for him?" "No, thank you," she replied coldly and then hung up. GK headquarters, inside the executive meeting room. Qin Chu was wearing a black dress shirt that was custom-made in Italy with cuffs adorned with luxurious diamonds. His look held an air of mystery. There was neither a trace of a smile nor warmth on his handsome face. Even his gaze seemed to contain shards of ice. He took over as the CEO of GK the day after returning to the country. His father, the corporation's chairman, had semi-retired and was happy to hand over the family business to his son. "President Qin, the Greenfield Manor project has already been approved by the chairman. All it needs is your signature. If you would take a look. When you have the time, would you please sign the document, so we can go ahead with construction?" the director of the Land Development Department inquired cautiously. Chapter 18. Negotiation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Noodletown translated editor. Noodletown translated. Qin Chu held a black ink pen in his hand, spinning it casually without saying a word. The 20 or so executives in the room were equally silent, holding their breaths in fear of interrupting his thoughts. The atmosphere seemed to be a little tense. After a moment, Qin Chu opened his mouth and said, "That case. I've already rejected it." "Ha! Rejected it? Why would you do that, President Qin?" "It took our department 3 months to draft a proposal after spending the last year working out the budget and business metrics. It'll profit for sure, and has already been approved by the chairman." When Qin Chu heard those words, he raised his head and unconcernedly looked at the director of land development before saying, "GK is in my hands now and I don't need to justify my decisions. If you cannot accept it, simply hand in your letter of resignation. As the last words exited his mouth, he flung the pen onto the table, terrifying and silencing everyone. He proceeded to walk out of the conference room. He knew that the Greenfield Manor project would be profitable, but he also knew that if they were to go through with it, Second High School would be forced to relocate. Nobody knew how important Second High School meant to him, just as nobody knew how much he loved the girl named Huamian. Inside the president's office. President Qin, there was a call for you. I picked up, but she did not say who she was. Yang, his secretary, cautiously handed the cell phone over. The moment Qin Chu saw the caller ID, warmth rushed into his cold eyes. He called back immediately. Mian, you were looking for me. Qin Chu, let's talk. On the other side of the phone, Huamian had calmed down from her enraged state. Sure, I'll pick you up. Where are you? You don't need to do that. Meet me at Café Insane on Half Mountain Road. Alright, I'll head over right now. Hanging up, Qin Chu's lips perched up into a smile. He was a completely different person than he was in the meeting room. Yang's jaw almost dropped from surprise. The new president had been employed for a week already, but Yang had never seen him smile at anyone, not even the chairman. But this call made his boss smile. Oh gosh. It seemed like the caller was an important person to the president, and the secretary made a mental note to pay attention to that number next time. Qin Chu drove his Audi R8 to their rendezvous spot, arriving in less than 15 minutes. Huamian was already waiting inside. From afar, he saw her sitting by the window. He could only see the side of her face, but the sight of her had already given him butterflies in his stomach nonetheless. For the past 7 years, she was constantly on his mind, and the thought of her almost drove him to insanity. He suppressed the urges in his heart and slowly walked in. Huamian was dressed simply. Before meeting Qin Chu, she returned to her apartment to change. She was wearing plain white pants and a yellow tee. The look was simple but poised. Huamian was also too lazy for makeup unless it was for special occasions. She felt that rubbing chemicals on her face made it sticky, and since it didn't seem to have anti-aging effects, she'd rather not go through all that trouble. Qin Chu strode over and sat down in front of her. Huamian's thoughts snapped back to reality and she calmly said, "What do you want to drink?" "I'll have whatever you are having," he answered. "But I'm drinking water." "Then I'll drink water too," he insisted. Huamian felt helpless as she waved the waiter over, and said, "Excuse me, can he get a cup of water?" Turning back around, she glared at the face in front of her, ever so familiar yet distant, before slowly opening her mouth. Qin Chu. "Emicham. Let's talk." "Sure. What do you want from me?" "I want us to go back to what we were before," Qin Chu blurted out without a second thought. "Ha, that's impossible, Qin Chu. Things are different now. Everything is different." Huamian smiled bitterly. "I'm sorry about your stepfather, I only found out recently." Surprisingly, Qin Chu apologized with an extremely sincere attitude. Having known Qin Chu for so long, she knew how prideful he was. Willingly admitting his faults was a Herculean task for Qin Chu. The dead can't come back to life, what can an apology do? "I can make it up to you," Qin Chu added. Huamian sneered, "Make it up to me. With what, your life? Or your money? Did you know that my mom got hypertension yesterday after you went to find her, and she ended up in the hospital? We've already had one death in the family, what else do you want? Do you want me to die too? Then you will be happy, right?" Chapter 19. Moving out. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Noodletown Translated Editor. Noodletown Translated, I didn't know things would turn out like that. Qin Chu, let me go. I am serious. The 7 years without you treated me quite well. Now that you are back, the first thing you've done is disrupting my family. Did you know that I regret dating you? I should have known better than to date someone from a rich family. If it weren't for our relationship, my stepfather would still be alive and my mother wouldn't hate me. It's been 7 years, and she still refuses to forgive me. Now, I am finally living a normal life, so please leave me alone. Do you really mean that? Chin Chu questioned Huamian with sorrow and grief lacing his eyes. Huamian pursed her lips and slowly answered, yes, I do. I will be married to Ning Ziyuan soon. We've been together for 3 years, and we have a great relationship. Let the past go. After hearing Huamian's words, Chin Chu remained still without speaking another word. Anyways, I'll never see you again because there's no reason to. If you cause my family any more trouble, I'll call the cops. That's all. When Huamian was done talking, she took out 100 yuan and left it on the table before leaving. Her personality was the same as it was 7 years ago. She had always been decisive and was never hesitant or sloppy. That was the quirky girl Chin Chu loved. As to what happened at her mom's place, she may have misunderstood his intention. He really wanted to make amends for what happened in the past. 1,000,000 yuan wasn't a lot to him, but it would make their lives easier. However, not only did Huamian's mother refuse to accept it, she also cursed him. He knew that his own hands did not cause the death of Huamian's stepfather, but he was ultimately the reason that it happened. The dead could not be revived, so Huamian's hate was reasonable. Staring at the 2 cups of water on the table, Chin Chu sat alone for a long time before finally leaving the cafe. After their meeting, Huamian returned to her apartment with a heavy heart. She felt like she was very straightforward with her words, but she wasn't sure if Chin Chu would accept them. They hadn't seen each other in 7 years, and a lot must have happened during this time. Did he not find a girlfriend while he was abroad? Her thoughts started to run wild. She was pulled back to reality when she heard the doorknob turning. Ning Ziyuan pushed open the door and walked in, unsurprised that Huamian was home. Ziyuan, you're back. Did you eat yet? He answered with a strange expression on his face before heading into his bedroom. He ignored Huamian, who was sitting on the couch in the living room. Huamian followed him in. Did you have a lot of surgeries today? Are you tired? Ning Ziyuan didn't answer, but rather, he opened the closet and began packing. Ziyuan, what are you doing? I won't be living here from now on, he said with a cold tone. Why not? Because I don't want to see your face. His answer was simple and vicious. Huamian fell silent. I am going to live in the new place, and I will leave the furniture and appliances here. I don't plan on returning your part of the down payment. I've spent enough on you over the past 3 years, so I'll count the down payment as payback. From now on, we don't owe each other anything. Ziyuan, money's not the problem. But the problem is that I have no money. Haha, how rich is your ex? He's the prince of the GK business empire, isn't he? Huamian, I've really underestimated you. You have such a powerful ex-boyfriend, so what are you doing with me? Were you just using me to pass the time? Chapter 20. Unworthy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Noodletown translated editor. Noodletown translated. Judged by the way Ning Ziyuan spoke, he seemed to know already who Chin Chu was. In fact, it wouldn't have been hard to figure it out. Chin Chu's name appeared on finance newspapers and TV shows quite frequently these days. Ziyuan, I spoke with him today, and I'm never going to see him again, Huamian explained patiently. I just want to be with you. Don't be upset anymore, okay? Like I'd believe any more of your bullshit. Do you still think I'm going to marry you? I would have to be insane. What, am I just going to wait for you to have your little affair after the wedding? With that, Ning Ziyuan picked up his leather suitcase bitterly and headed towards the door. Huamian reached out to stop him. Ziyuan, have you calmed down? Did you really mean what you just said? She asked again. Get out of my way. I don't want to talk to you. If you ask me, I think it's better for you to quit your job. After all, it wouldn't be good for us to work at the same hospital anyways. I'm a doctor, so I'm naturally not going to quit. You're just a nurse without much prospect, so why don't you just go find your ex-boyfriend and live the high life? With that, Ning Ziyuan angrily shook off Hua Mian's hand, shoved open the door, and left. As she watched Ning Ziyuan walked away, Hua Mian was surprised that she didn't feel the slightest bit of sadness. It was as if she could finally let out the breath that she had been holding for a long time. But, how could that be the case? She was left dumbstruck by her own realization. A moment later, she took out her cell phone and sent a WeChat message to Zhu Lingling. Lingling, what are you doing right now? I just got off a flight, and I'm eating instant noodles right now. Come out for a drink, my boyfriend and I just broke up. I should be upset, right? Ahem. You guys broke up. What happened? Did Qin Chu leave the country again? Please, girl. My current boyfriend is Ning Ziyuan. Oh, that guy. You should have gotten rid of him long ago. He wasn't good enough for you anyways. Alright, stop blabbing. Are you coming? Of course. You find a place, and I'll be right there. Hua Mian's best friend, Zhu Lingling, was indeed true to her words. 20 minutes later, she arrived at Dark Night Bar. As a flight attendant, her appeal was unquestionable, and the skin-tight black dress she wore made her look especially alluring. Hua Mian, on the other hand, didn't look like someone who was enjoying a night out at all. In fact, she looked more like a waitress. Come on, we're out to play. Can't you dress up a little? Don't be like an old maid. Hua Mian smiled. I've never had that many clothes to begin with. Over the past few years, half of her salary had gone to support her brother in his studies, and the other half had been saved to buy a home with Ning Ziyuan. She didn't spend much money on herself. It was true that she didn't have a lot of nice clothes. Even the dress she had worn to the high school reunion originally belonged to Zhu Lingling. Zhu Lingling bought it a while ago but then decided that she didn't want to wear it, so she gave it to Hua Mian. For such a beautiful young girl of only 20.4 years old, she really hadn't indulged in the finer things in life. Mian, leaving Ning Ziyuan is no big deal. He doesn't know what he's losing. You know what they say, some people don't know a good thing when they see it. He's blind, and that's why he left you. Don't say that. I'm not as perfect as you think, Hua Mian said quietly as she picked up her cocktail glass. Says who? As far as I can see, you're one of a kind. You're a genius with an IQ of 130, okay, stop. Hua Mian quickly interrupted her before she had the chance to finish. I swear you're going to keep bringing that up for the rest of our lives. However, what Zhu Lingling said wasn't wrong. Hua Mian was 20.4, yet all her classmates were 20.7 or 20.8. This was because she'd skipped 3 grades. Besides, she was admitted into Sea City's second high school, an exclusive academy for the elite, with a grade of 697. The exam had 700 points in total. At the time, it had been quite the event and she was even featured on the newspaper. Her stepfather was still alive back then. That night, the whole family went to celebrate at a 5-star hotel to enjoy a luxurious buffet. Now, everything was different. If she didn't date Qin Chu, she wouldn't have incurred the wrath of the Qin family, and her stepfather wouldn't have been killed. Her future should have been a bright one as well. In her second year of high school, she received an acceptance letter from the top school in America, with a full scholarship. However, she rejected several opportunities in order to be with Qin Chu, yet what she had gotten in return was a death in her family and a broken home. Right then, she heard a voice, disrupting her thought. Hi, Hua Mian, it's been a while. She turned her head and was caught by surprise when she saw the man's face. Why are you here? Huamion's attitude took on an antagonistic edge.